Good day, Junior Tuckies. I am Mrs. Beardenkamp, and in today's lesson, I will be teaching you about poetic devices. Let's get into it. Firstly, what are poetic devices? They are literary devices used in poetry. A poetic device, like the ones I'm going to show you, help create rhythm. It enhances meaning for the reader, and it can intensify the mood or tone of poetry and prose. Let's look at all the different examples on the following slides. First off, what is a hyperbole? It's a figure of speech that creates exaggeration or emphasis. It is usually quite easy to identify as the exaggeration is so extreme. It's often used to express larger-than-life feelings and emotions. It's used in novels, plays, poetry, and in advertising. The key to understanding and using hyperbole effectively is to purposefully exaggerate the word or part of a sentence. Let's have a look at the cartoon as an example. It says over here, I am the greatest hyperbole writer in the history of hyperbole. By exaggerating greatest, we know that this is definitely an exaggeration. Let's check out a couple of examples on the next slide. Examples of hyperbole. First off, I'm so hungry I could die. Now I know many of us have felt like this, but in fact, if we miss only one meal, we actually won't die. Next up, she wept an ocean of tears. Now I'm sure many of you may have felt like this or felt these kind of emotions, especially if you've lost someone in your life. It can feel like you have cried an ocean of tears. The next example is an example from literature, from the novel To Be Exact, To Kill a Mockingbird. To Kill a Mockingbird takes place during the Great Depression in Macomb County, Georgia, a sleepy little town where nothing ever happens. Our author over here wanted to emphasize or exaggerate how the Great Depression had affected people so badly. I highlighted the exaggerations in the text. There was no hurry, for there was nowhere to go, nothing to buy and no money to buy it with, nothing to see outside the boundaries of Macomb County. Let's look at even more examples on the next slide. This example of hyperbole was used in Donald Trump's inaugural speech when he wanted to try and align people. This is just an example of how poetic devices are used in the real world, and sometimes it's used to manipulate people. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now. We are one nation, and their pain is our pain. Their dreams are our dreams, and their success will be our success. We share one heart, one home, and one glorious destiny. Now we know after many years of Donald Trump being in power that he did not mean the things that he was saying in this speech. He was using hyperbole to manipulate people to get on his side. Let's have a look at the cartoon. This cartoonist has taken hyperbole very literally by drawing the shoes that take so long to put on 50 million years later. What are litotes? Litotes are figures of speech that are the opposite to a hyperbole. It's actually an understatement. It can be expressed ironically or sarcastically. It always contains a negative, and it usually comes after a superlative. Remember, it always depends on context. Let's have a look at examples on the next slide. Examples of litotes. You know, it's really not that hard to do maths. So what do we mean over here? That it's quite easy to understand. Or it's not rocket science. Another one to explain to us how it's easy to understand. He's no spring chicken. That actually means he's getting older. It's not my first rodeo, meaning that a person is very experienced. An example in literature is when Mercutio in Romeo and Juliet ironically understates the size and depth of a wound that he's received from Tybalt. I've highlighted the places where this understatement happens. No, 'tis not so deep as well nor so wide as a church door, but 'tis enough 'twill serve. Ask for me tomorrow, and you shall find a grave man. The grave man at the end of that extract over there is Mercutio actually foreshadowing his death. He's trying to downplay the injury that he's got, or basically understate it. What is allusion? Allusion is a figure of speech that describes a thing, a person, or a situation without directly saying the name. An allusion is not described in detail and will only ever be referred to by the writer. The writer expects the reader to have the knowledge to understand the allusion. It's the reader's responsibility to also spot this type of allusion. Here are 3 common uses of allusion in literature. First off is mythological. We can have Greek, Roman, or Norse mythology references in literature. Or number 2, biblical. Anything from the Bible. This is used quite often in literature, and the writers expect us to understand this reference. And then 3, literary. So referring to other novels, other poems, and other prose in a specific literary work, our writer expects us to know this. Let's check out examples on the next slide. Common examples of allusion. His smile is like kryptonite to me. This is a reference to Superman, whose downfall was kryptonite. She felt like she'd had a golden ticket. This is a reference to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, when Charlie gets a golden ticket and he feels like the luckiest boy in the world. If I'm not home by midnight, my car might turn into a pumpkin. This is a reference to the fairy tale Cinderella, where if she goes out past 12, her carriage turns into a pumpkin. She smiles like a Cheshire cat. This is reference to the novel Alice in Wonderland. The Cheshire cat has a bright and beautiful smile. Chocolate cake is my Achilles heel. This is a reference to the Greek hero Achilles, and we often call it our Achilles tendon or our Achilles heel, and that happens to be Achilles' downfall. He's a cool guy, but he becomes a lovesick Romeo every time he's around. This is a direct reference to Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Romeo is a lovesick character and is an exact reference to how we've done it in the sentence. We got a new Einstein in school today. This is a reference to Albert Einstein, the famous mathematician. What is satire? Satire is a form or the use of humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose or criticize people's stupidity or vices. It's mostly seen in criticizing politics and social issues. Satire has many similarities to irony, malapropism, overstatement, understatement, juxtaposition, and parody. Let's look at why writers use satire on the next slide. Why do writers use satire? To bring attention to issues that might otherwise be overlooked, to advocate for social reform, to provide insights into human weaknesses, to amuse readers by bringing powerful figures down a notch, to invite readers to reflect on their own weaknesses and shortcomings, to mock literary or stylistic conventions, to recast or reform strongly held convictions as harmful and or meaningless, to make light of or remove anxiety about unpleasant situations by making fun of them. What is irony? Irony is saying the opposite of what you mean, but this leaves a very open-ended understanding of what irony is. I will be showing you the different types of irony and examples to explain it better. We get 3 different types of irony. First up is verbal irony. It's like saying, I loved that appointment after visiting the dentist. Then we get dramatic irony. This is when the audience knows key elements of a plot, while actors on stage or characters in your book actually have no idea about what's going on. Then we get situational irony. This refers to an unexpected, paradoxical turn of events. Irony often overlaps with satire and sarcasm. Let's have a look at the cartoon. The dog drinking the toilet water says, "I don't share my toilet water. I don't know where your mouth has been." This is very ironic because the dog doesn't even know what's been in that toilet water either. Why do we use irony? First of all, we use situational irony to demonstrate how human beings are always at the mercy of an unpredictable world. We always have unpredictable things happening to us. Then we use dramatic irony to emphasize the fact that human knowledge is always in part and often correct. So the audience having the satisfaction of being the all-knowing being for once. And then verbal irony can often point out characteristics of a character, their wittiness, or even their stupidity. Here are some examples of verbal irony, dramatic irony, and situational irony. Verbal irony, we can say, if it were a cold day and someone says, "Isn't it a warm day?" Dramatic irony is seen in many Shakespearean plays like Romeo and Juliet, Othello, and Macbeth. Remember, it means that the audience knows something detrimental to the plot that the actors on stage do not. Then, situational irony. This would be if a firehouse burned down. It's ironic because a firehouse is built to protect people against fires. What is a paradox? A paradox is a figure of speech when you're saying a phrase that seems to contradict itself, but if you look a little bit deeper, it actually has a valuable life lesson. A very famous paradox from Oscar Wilde is, "Life is much too important to be taken seriously." We've been told all our lives that life should be a serious thing. You go to school, you get a degree, you work, you live, you die. Whereas Oscar Wilde says here, life is too important to be taken seriously. We still need to have a little bit of fun. Remember, a paradox is different from an oxymoron because it contains a phrase. Let's look at some examples. Here is an example from Romeo and Juliet, where Shakespeare wanted to explain to us that love and hate are usually hand in hand. Here's much to do with hate, but with more love. Why then, O brawling love, O loving hate, O anything of nothing first creates, O heavy lightness, serious vanity. And then we can also see it in George Orwell's novel 1984, where he says, "War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength." We have to take that in, take it in and think what it means. Do we have war when there is peace? Maybe between people. Do we have freedom in slavery? And is there ignorance in strength? What is a synecdoche? It is a figure of speech when one part is used to describe a whole. For example, "The captain commands 100 sails" is a synecdoche that uses sails to refer to all of the ships, being the thing of which the sail is part of. It is commonly used in poetry and prose. We also use it to explain idioms and in colloquial expressions as well as in slang. One way to remember it is, usually a body part is used to refer to a human as a whole, like the heart, the hand, the head, or the eyes. Have a look at the cartoon. Synonyms for synecdoche are metonymy, allegory, image, metaphor, simile, trope, and it goes on. Let's look at why writers use synecdoche on the next slide. Examples of common synecdoche. Nice wheels. Wheels being part explaining the whole car. Hey, greybeard. Greybeard is part of what it means to starting to become older. South Africa won 27-16. South Africa is being used as a part to express one sports team winning. Can you please buy me handy Andy at the shops? Now, this is a fun thing that South Africans usually do, is that we do not say a specific product, we say it's handy Andy. So handy Andy is used as part of a whole to describe any type of cream cleaning product. Let's put our heads together to get this project done. Heads here is part of the whole, meaning every single person's brain being put together to complete a project. What is an extended metaphor? An extended metaphor is when a metaphor begins in line 1 and ends in the final line. The reader watches how the metaphor unfolds through the poem or through the novel. They are much more complex and contain many different comparisons compared to a normal metaphor. We can actually break up an extended metaphor into 2 parts. Number 1, the tenor or the comparison, and number 2, the vehicle to which the tenor is being compared. For example, life is a highway. Life is the tenor, the comparison, and highway is the vehicle to which the tenor is being compared. So life is like a highway. Yes, it's fast, it's going. You never can really stop, and that's why this metaphor is quite effective. Let's look at why writers use extended metaphors on the next slide. Why are extended metaphors used? It's to create symbols or symbolism within a text. It's also to create recurring metaphors over and over again in a text to make sure that the reader understands. It's often used to create an allegory, which means every single character has a specific symbol. Here are some synonyms for an extended metaphor: an allegory, a symbol, a parable, fable, metaphor, story, and it goes on. Let's look at an example of an extended metaphor on the next slide. This is an extract from Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken. It is a poem about 2 roads coming to a fork, just like the picture I've inserted here. The speaker looks down one road and imagines what it would look like, and then he chooses to take the road less traveled for more adventures. This is a true metaphor for life. There will come a time where you will be given 2 options and you need to choose one option, and you can only choose that one. You will never know where the untaken road or the other option would have gone, so maybe choosing the one less traveled or the one not taken will be the greater adventure. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverge in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. The 2 roads represent 2 paths we often are presented with. Remember, you can only choose one. I hope this lesson helped you understand poetic devices better. Next up is types of poetry. Bye-bye!